The Seattle Kraken lose? What do you mean they lose? This is 2023. They don't lose in 2023. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, yes, unfortunately, the Kraken do drop their first game of this year, losing 4-1 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Though two of those are empty netters, so it was actually a lot closer than that score makes it look. Of course, though, the biggest difference between this game and at least the vast majority of that 8-game winning streak that is brought to an end by it isn't that the Kraken only scored one goal, where they'd been scoring at least 4 goals in all of those except for the Boston game where they scored 3. No, it's the fact that it was a home game. Their first one in over 2 weeks. So of course they lose. Because while the Kraken do have, thanks in part to that historic run that they just had on the road, one of the best road records in the entire NHL. In fact, they're second in road points at this point. Second only to a team that they're going to face in their next home game, the New Jersey Devils. Their home record is just over NHL 500. And now after this game, under normal 500, where they're just 10-9-2. Now that being said, and as much as I was really hoping that they would win this game, if nothing else for the fans that came out to support them and give them a standing ovation after that road streak that they just had, in the end, yeah, it was a very good team in the Tampa Bay Lightning that they were facing, a team that they still have yet to beat in their team history, and the streak did have to come to an end at some point. I mean, they weren't going to win every game until the Stanley Cup final as much as we would have liked them to. Plus, on top of that, I think that we can excuse them having one game where they just really don't show all that much energy, which was kind of the case in this one, after having pretty much 2 weeks of playing every other night and even a back-to-back on top of that, which they're going to add to with a back-to-back playing again tomorrow, now, and then continue to play every other day for another few games. The point is, January, there's a lot of games for this team, and to have a couple of these games here and there where they just don't really seem to have it is going to happen, even if it hasn't happened up until this point yet. There is, though, one other reason that I could see some people having for why the Kraken lost this game and hadn't lost a bunch of these other ones on this road trip. And that was that Philip Grubauer got the start in net. Now, yes, we know Grubauer got the one win on the road trip as part of the back-to-back that they had in Buffalo and Montreal, but other than that game in Buffalo, which was score-wise the closest of all the games in that winning streak, Jones was absolutely incredible for the Kraken, getting 7 wins and on either side of that one Grubauer start, getting back-to-back shutouts. So why is Grubauer then in net for this home game coming off of that road streak? Well, for one thing, again, like I just said, they have another back-to-back, and the more important half of that back-to-back is the game coming up in Edmonton tomorrow or today when you're watching this. So I do think with Jones being on the hot streak, they wanted him against the team that they need to beat a little bit more. And to be clear, well, I do feel like I kind of have to come to the defense of Grubauer here, especially after the Kraken lose with him in net again. And a lot of what I've been people saying about Grubauer compared to Jones, and that not really seeming fair, I still think Jones has played better and certainly earned the starting role at this point, especially with the hot streak that he's been on lately. That having been said, well, still Jones' numbers are overall a little bit better than Grubauer's. There is one big thing that goes overlooked, I think, when comparing Jones to Grubauer, where a lot of people think that there's a big gap between the two, and honestly, I just don't see it. And that's that the team, for whatever reason, just plays way better in front of Jones. And I don't just mean defensively in their own end of the ice, where although the two are facing roughly the same number of shots on goal per game, Grubauer seems to be facing higher quality shots, at least when it comes to opposing expected goals, where he's facing close to, but not quite, half a goal more per game than what Jones sees. No, I'm actually talking more about what they do at the other end of the ice. It's something that I noticed in that last road trip that they had back in December when they went to the Southeast and lost in Carolina and Tampa Bay again. You know, the road trip with the whole Alexiak suspension and then Schultz injury, which kind of overshadowed everything else. But the point is, I started to notice that whenever Grubauer was in net, regardless of how he was playing, the team just could not seem to score goals at the other end. It didn't really matter if Grubauer let in 2 goals or 6. The Kraken just weren't able to score enough to keep them in the game, regardless, again, of what was happening at their end of the ice. So I decided to take a quick look at what I call goal support between the two goaltenders. I mean, I'm not the first or certainly only person to call it that, but basically it's just how many goals on average does the team score with each goaltender in net for them. And honestly, I was surprised by how big the gap was. I was still expecting to find that they were scoring more when Jones is in net than Grubauer, but the difference is, again, honestly pretty shocking. When Jones is in net, the Kraken are scoring more what we've been used to over these last few games, an average of 4.24 goals per game. Meanwhile, when Grubauer's in net, they're putting up a much more like last season, 2.30 goals per game. I guess closer to 2.31, but the difference isn't huge. So for whatever reason, and I don't think you can put it on goaltending, at least not until goaltenders start picking up assists more frequently than a couple times a season, the Kraken are scoring almost 2 goals per game more when Jones is in net than when Grubauer is. Now, if you want to just say that that's good luck or whatever, fine, we can argue about that all day long. Ultimately, there's no way to really be right or wrong there. The point is that it does end up having a pretty big effect on another stat that, for whatever reason, keeps getting attributed to goaltenders, and honestly is the whole reason I'm bringing all of this up in the first place, because I've seen other people bringing up this stat online, especially when comparing Grubauer versus Jones, but just goaltenders in general. And other than plus minus, and maybe even more so, it might be my least favorite commonly used stat in the NHL. That being a goaltender's win-loss record, where, thanks in large part to this differential between Grubauer and Jones as far as how much the team scores when either's in net, something that they don't have a lot of control over, Jones has a fantastic win-loss record of 21 wins, 5 losses, and 3 overtime losses. Meanwhile, Grubauer, who has worse, but not that much worse, other stats like save percentage and goals against average, has a much worse win-loss record with just 4 wins, 8 losses, and 1 overtime loss. And look, with goaltender stats in general, for a variety of reasons, which I've actually been thinking about doing a video about this sometime here in the near future, probably like a NHL 101 type thing, but just goaltender stats, they are pretty hard to find a good stat to best measure a goaltender and how they're performing. Obviously, most often we tend to use save percentage and goals against average, but with goals against average, there's a problem that it doesn't matter if the goaltender lets in 3 goals on 15 shots or 60 shots. 3 goals against is 3 goals against in a game. Meanwhile, save percentage does a little bit better job there, but again, there's a big difference between a goaltender facing 60 shots from up by the blue line versus facing 60 shots right up in their face around the crease. Okay, 60 again, I don't know how I ended up on that number, but you get my point. Not every shot is created equal, which is where expected goals comes in, but even there's some issues, and again, this is why I need a whole separate video. Still, even with all the holes that you can poke in all those other commonly used stats, win-loss is easily the worst of them. It's honestly even worse than when it gets attributed to pitchers in baseball, where it's a similar thing. A pitcher has no control over how many runs their team scores. Something that was a big frustration for Mariners fans with Felix Hernandez, who would constantly be one of the best pitchers in baseball and probably should have won 2 or 3 Cy Youngs. He only ends up winning 1, and a large reason for that is that when voting for the Cy Young, all of those gray-haired guys that have been around for 80 years tend to look at win-loss record, and Felix was well known for just getting 1 or 2 runs of run support if he was lucky. Something that happens so often to him that now when it happens to any other pitcher, we call it getting Felixed. Anyway, all of this is to say that, well, again, like I said in the beginning, I do think that Jones has been playing noticeably better than Grubauer and certainly deserves to be the primary starter at this point. I also think that Grubauer has not been playing that much worse than Jones and certainly doesn't deserve the attitude that I've seen some people have of the Kraken might as well just forfeit the game if they're going to start Grubauer. It's just not the case. Neither one has been much above average. In fact, both have been having a relatively around NHL average save percentage at 5-on-5, which is a lot better than their overall save percentage thanks to the atrocious penalty kill that the Kraken have. Something that's a whole separate issue. But again, since I saw people bringing up the win-loss record specifically, I don't know, I just felt like I had to come to the defense of Grubauer when it comes to that stat, if nothing else. Because honestly, it's just a terrible stat and really shouldn't be used for much of anything other than, I guess, adding to the praise of a goaltender like Jones when things are going well, because that's fun to do. Even then, I don't think it holds all that much weight as a stat. Ultimately, winning and losing is a team stat, not one player, and I don't know what this obsession over attaching wins and losses to one player is in all of sports. But anyway, let me know what you think down in the comment section. We still do have a game to get to. It is a game, though, that I probably won't spend that much time on, and not just because I went on this big rant about Grubauer and Jones and goalie stats in general, but more because, honestly, it just wasn't that interesting of a game. Usually, I at least try to find something fun or a takeaway from a game at the very least, which I guess you could use that whole goaltender rant as that. But this one kind of was a game that just sort of happened. There wasn't all that much as far as interesting hockey. So if this is your first time here, or this was the first game you watched, I'm sorry. I promise hockey is more interesting than this game. Now, during the first few minutes of the game, it didn't look like that was going to be the case. Not necessarily in a good way for the Kraken, though, as the Lightning were getting a lot of shots off on goal and had a couple of shifts with a lot of offensive zone time and offensive chances. Fortunately, thanks in large part to Grubauer, they do get out of that without giving up the first score of the game, something that for the Kraken has made a big difference when it comes to winning or losing. And after those first few minutes, which I suppose this was probably a good thing for the Kraken considering how the first few minutes went, the rest of the game was rather uneventful. Both teams do end up getting a power play in the back half of this first period, the Lightning getting theirs right around the midpoint. Fortunately for the Kraken, their penalty kill was fantastic tonight again against one of the better power play teams in the league after having a poor night against the worst team in the league and one of the worst power plays. They're right back to performing well against the league's best. The Kraken then get a power play of their own, which they do get some chances on, but just aren't able to make anything happen. So again, they're a similar story to what we've seen for the last month and a half now, getting chances, but just not getting anything to go. And in the end, even if you get those chances, you do need to make something of them eventually. With both teams then having come up empty in their first power play of the game, a trade that honestly at this point the Kraken will probably happily take, especially with a power play team like the Lightning. We do get into the final 2 minutes of this first period, still scoreless, but with the Lightning leading drastically on shots on goal. However, most of those are in the first couple minutes of this period, as over the last 15 plus minutes of this first period, there really hasn't been that much as far as offensive opportunity for either team, both playing pretty well defensively at their end of the ice, right up until the Kraken don't. Honestly, though, this is just a nice tip out in front of the net. Yeah, you'd probably like to have one of your defensemen guarding or at least contesting the guy standing right in front of Grubauer, but it's a shot from the blue line that's tipped out in front of Grubauer, gets into the back of the net, giving the Lightning the 1-0 lead, and for Grubauer's part, really not much of anything he could do here. So we head to the second period where you'd think the Kraken might have a little bit more energy and try to get back out in this game and give this crowd that's excited for how the road trip went a little bit more of a show. And they do play a little bit better than how they did in the first period. They don't allow the Lightning to get the great push like they did at the start. But other than that, it's pretty much the first period all over again. Both teams do get a power play at the back end of it after there's not much scoring or offensive opportunity for the majority of the period. And the Kraken do get a pretty good scoring chance that just takes a fantastic save from Vasilevsky, getting from one side of the net to the other to make the save. And that Kraken power play comes up empty as well. Then it's the Lightning's turn on the power play in the final couple of minutes, and they too get a prime scoring opportunity as Kucherov fires off a pass from the faceoff dot to the far side of the Kraken net, where Perry's waiting on the back door, and all he has to do is tap it into the goal to give the Lightning the 2-0 lead. But Grubauer's having none of it as he makes an absolutely spectacular save, doing the full splits and getting his toe to the puck before Perry can get his stick on it. In the end, breaking Perry's stick as he gets more of Grubauer's foot than the puck, and the puck bounces harmlessly out into the corner. And the Kraken survive that one, thanks to, again, one of the saves of the season for a Kraken goaltender. It's a save for Grubauer that, when asked about it after the game, whether or not this hurt for him to do, he pretty confidently, and even with a little bit of a chuckle, responded, "No, this didn't hurt to make this save." Which, look, I understand that all goaltenders do the splits as part of their warm-ups before every game and are more than flexible enough to do this, but to do it in game action to make a save like this, I'm sorry, he is blatantly wrong that this didn't hurt. I mean, I'm sore just looking at it. So it hurt me if nothing else. What it didn't hurt though is Seattle's chances of getting back in this game. At least not until a few minutes into the third period. We do get through the rest of the second scoreless and into the third, where the Kraken get their third power play of the game. Once again, they get some chances, but come up empty. And the Lightning don't end up getting another power play, but they do end up scoring 5-on-5. And once again, this is another one that I have a hard time putting on Grubauer, as it comes from a defensive turnover behind the Kraken net, as Dunn with a loose puck overskates it, which allows Nick Paul to get to it, and then Dunn is able to recover just in time to screen Grubauer as Paul gets out in front of the net, wheels around, takes the shot, and roofs it into the back of the net before Grubauer sees the shot coming. And just like that, it's 2-0 with the Dunn turnover and screen of Grubauer. Now, Dunn has had a fantastic season, but this was definitely not his best play. In fact, it might be his worst play of the season, which is probably saying something. The good news, at least I suppose, is that this second goal for the Lightning is enough to finally wake the Kraken up into this game, as they gain momentum pretty quickly after this goal is scored and get a few shifts on the offensive end and some shots off on goal. Really the first time this game they're able to get a number of shots in succession off on goal, and eventually one of them goes in. It's Vince Dunn making up for his mistake at the other end of the ice a few minutes prior, as he fires off a shot from up in the corner that finds its way through traffic, off of a defensive shin out in front of the net, and into the back of it past Vasilevsky, who was playing Vasilevsky style in goal. It looked like he was going to pitch a shutout, and really the only way to get something past him was probably something like this, banking one off of one of his defenders in front of him and into the back of the net. Originally, in live action, I did think that Tolvanen tipped this in, but even with everything going his way so far with the Kraken, he doesn't quite get his stick on it, as is a defensive shin that it goes off. So at the very least, the shutout is broken, and the Kraken might be able to build some momentum. No, not really. The Lightning actually get a couple of chances trying to respond to this Kraken goal, and eventually Seattle does start to get some more shots off until eventually they end up pulling Grubauer. But that pull of Grubauer comes at a very inopportune time. It's the kind of thing that we saw at the start of last season, as they pull Grubauer right as the puck gets dumped into the offensive end. And I don't think he starts skating off the ice until Vasilevsky has control of the puck behind Tampa's net. And sure enough, right away with Grubauer on the bench, the puck gets up to one Tampa Bay player along the boards and then chipped out in front of, I think it was Hagel, that ends up outskating Sprong to it. And he puts it into the back of the net, with the Kraken never even gaining possession of the puck with the sixth man out on the ice. And that pretty much kills their chances of winning the game. Eventually, they do go empty net again, trying to get back from now a 2-goal deficit. And this time, Hedman finds the empty net. So that's how we end up with that 4-1 score. The Kraken, I think, may have had a chance. Still, it would have been an outside chance to score with the empty net, especially with a team that plays in their end like the Lightning do. But they never really gave themselves a chance, pulling Grubauer when they didn't have possession. So in the end, it's a disappointing 4-1 loss that was really more of a 2-1 loss, and even at that, not a very exciting 2-1 game. It didn't really have that much flow really throughout the entire thing, as both teams were pretty much playing the dump and chase and then keeping most everything to the outside in the offensive end. A lot of puck along the board play, which usually serves the Kraken pretty well, as they're strong on the forecheck and backcheck. But against a team like Tampa that doesn't allow a lot of open ice and also is pretty good along the boards, it led to not that interesting of hockey. I mean, I'm sure some people found it interesting. If you really like the dump and chase and watching guys fight along the boards, then you had a great time with this game. As for the Kraken 3 stars in this game, the first one, easily Philip Grubauer. He stops 27 of 29 shots on goal while he's in the goal. They end up with 31, obviously 2 on the empty net, go straight in. So a good night for him, even outside of the whole talk that we had at the beginning of this video. Other than that, the third line played pretty well. Really, all three of them, Tolvanen, Gord, and Bjorkstrand. Gord, I think, had the best game of any Kraken skater, so I'll give him the second star. And it's a tough call between Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen, but I think Tolvanen played slightly better at both ends of the ice. So I don't really think this was a bad enough game to just give 2 stars, so we'll go Grubauer first star, Gord second star, especially playing against his old team and having a pretty good game. He just barely misses a goal at one point on a very nice pass there towards the end of the third period, trying to tie things up before they went empty with the net. And then Tolvanen, again, gets really close to a goal of his own, and again, played really well in that forecheck, backcheck type of game, which this had a lot of. Let me know what you thought, though, about this game and who your 3 stars would be down in the comment section below, though. I would be perfectly happy giving Vince Dunn one of the stars with him scoring the only goal for the Kraken, but considering it was pretty much his fault the second one went into the Kraken net, I kind of saw that as more making up for that and breaking even as far as that's concerned. With that said, though, if you have made it to this point, as always, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until next time, which will be today as of when you're watching this, or tonight, in Edmonton, a very important game for the Kraken, as Edmonton's still in that playoff race. Stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.